Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me in back, Mike? Do I need to make this closer to my mouth? Button my shirt. How's that? Okay. My voice is not as loud as usual today.
Just give us a minute, we'll dial it in.
Okay. So welcome, everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces and a few that aren't. So I'm going to ask you to help me. How many of you have never meditated before? How many of you would consider yourselves new to meditation? Okay. How many of you meditate every day?
Does
Try to count. Yeah. Okay. How many of you, how's that? How many of you have been at meditation teachings at the center here, either from Brendan or from Rinpoche? Some and not others. Okay, most of you. Okay. Okay. So, Thursday nights are supposed to be mostly about meditation, but this is a Buddhist meditation center. And these days, mindfulness meditation is very popular, and meditation is all over the place. But in the Buddhist tradition, meditation itself is not something that, it's just a tool. If we say meditation, we have to be more specific. It doesn't make it Buddhism, it doesn't make it the Buddhist teaching. And the Buddha left some instructions before he passed for his disciples. He said, in the future, many people will claim to be representing what I teach, but there are 4 tests as to whether what I teach is, what they're presenting is really my teaching. And I don't want to get into too detailed an explanation of that, but I want to show you how we can contain all of that in what's called bodhicitta mind. Bodhicitta mind. Citta means mind or heart. In Sanskrit, it means both. It can also mean intention in some contexts. All of those. And bodhi means awakening, waking up. So the Buddha was the one who woke up. That's what Buddha means. And the Tibetans they translated a lot of Sanskrit terms literally, but that one they didn't translate literally. They translated it as Sangye. Sang means all faults are cleared away, and Gye means all good qualities flourish. And so that's what happens when we wake up. When we wake up completely and become Buddha. And so bodhicitta mind starts with an understanding of that. Actually, bodhicitta mind is redundant. It's saying it's a bodhicitta, because mind is in citta. So it starts with an understanding of that. And then we develop a taste of it. And that taste gets stronger and stronger until the experience really gets genuine. And so the Buddha gave so many different teachings as different ways to get at that. Now, oftentimes you'll hear Buddhist teachers, when they're teaching in front of large groups of people, say the main thing is have a kind heart. Just have a kind heart. If you don't do anything else, have a kind heart. His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that a lot, and it's true. It's just about the best thing you can do in any circumstance. But having a kind heart is not, it's like maybe 1% of bodhicitta mind. Bodhicitta mind is something much bigger than that. On the other hand, it's because of bodhicitta that we can have a kind heart. That's our nature to begin with. So, the first test the Buddha gave for what is really my teaching is, he said, everything that is compounded is impermanent. Everything that's compounded is impermanent. So if someone teaches you something different than that, that's not my teaching. So bodhicitta, therefore, must not be something compounded. It has to be something that is uncompounded. How could that be? Do you understand compounded? Different things, different causes, different factors coming together. So this bodhicitta mind is not, if it's something we create from causes and conditions, then it's compounded, it's impermanent. We're working so hard and it comes and it goes, it's faded. That can't be the enlightenment of the Buddha. And the second test he gave is that everything that is zakshe is a Tibetan word, is suffering. And so this word zakshe is, because it's a really tough word, it gets a Reader's Digest translation most of the time. And depending on context, usually contaminated or defiled. But what it really means is leaked out. The Tibetan word for an individual person, an individual, is gangzak, a particular leak. Our experience of ourselves, which is the whole problem, isn't it, to begin with? It's a leak. From what? It's a leak from bodhicitta. It's a leak from Buddha nature. We see ourselves as separate from that. So the bodhicitta we're trying to discover within ourselves is not separate from ourselves. It's that sense of separation that is the mistake that causes all the problems. And then the third, so we've got the first test, is it compounded or uncompounded? Second, is it a leak or not? Third, all phenomena have no self-nature. Or, well, all phenomena are without an owner. So that's what we mean by a self. It's not that there's not the appearance of a thing. Buddhists don't argue with appearances. We argue with projecting things onto appearance. Most of what we experience as appearance is actually our projection. And it's very interesting now. Cognitive science, some cognitive scientists are very interested in Buddhism these days. But as Buddhists, if we look at some of the discoveries in modern cognitive science, it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting. For example, if you look at the nerves that go from the brain to the eye, 90% of the impulses on those nerves go out from the brain to the eye. 10% comes in. 90% is our projection, and 10% is the data coming in. So you've got a physical basis for what the Buddha was telling you. So to get to the point of just leaving things as they are, just appearance, that's a great accomplishment. So anyway, the third, all phenomena have no owner, no self. That's what we mean by a self, a solid entity that possesses it. It's not that there's not the appearance of all these phenomena. Another way we look at an individual person in Buddhism is as a bundle of aggregates, a bundle or a heap, a pungpo. So one way of looking at that heap is feeling, perception, form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. That's actually too much for this teaching here, but the very first bit, the very first part of that heap, the form, that is how things appear. And everything else is what we project onto it, how we react to the projections, and create the whole structure of our sense of self, our mind, me and that out there. And then from that, there's two basic moves, right? If there's I and that, then, well, there's three basic moves, but there's two. First, let's start with two. I can push it away, or I can grab it, right? The third is I can just sort of be bewildered. But those three moves become everything that happens in our minds. And it distracts us from things just as they are. So there's so many ways to get at this no self, no owner. And actually, this is the difference between the so-called Hinayana, the lesser or foundational vehicle, and the Mahayana, the great vehicle. In the Hinayana tradition, they teach Gangzaki Dagme, the lack of owner of an individual leak, or the selflessness of the individual, but not the selflessness of all phenomena. And so if I'm presenting this to you as all phenomena have no owner, that means that's really the Mahayana view. Not just the self, but every phenomena. It's the same game, the way we project an owner onto ourselves and the way we project an owner onto that drum. Like, we could look at that drum and we'll do a thought experiment. If I had prepared for class today, I would have taken the whole thing apart for you, but right now it looks like a drum, right? I mean, everybody look at it and it looks like a drum. But what if we take the different pieces all apart, those metal things on the side, and put the two skins on the ground, and then there's a round piece of wood? Would it still be a drum? Where's the drum? What happened to the drum, the owner of all of that? Or we could say, just take one of those metal pieces off, and everybody would probably still agree it's a drum, right? And then we could take two off, and then we could take all the metal pieces off. Is it still a drum or not? Take one side off it. What if you just held up the skin? Is that a drum? What makes it a drum? Where's the drum? So that's how, for example, in the Madhyamaka philosophy, just the tiny, tiny little sort of cliff notes, goes at everything, goes at moment to moment. There's nothing, you can't find the drum, and you can't find yourself, you can't find the cup, the more you analyze. And yet it's there, and we wouldn't say that you can't beat the drum or, drink the water. So that's a philosophical way to go at it, and then that view is combined with meditation. Or there's other approaches. There are the approaches of there's endless approaches in Buddhism. We can sit and we do our mundro, we do the Guru Yoga, we receive the blessing of the Lama and the lineage. And just let be in that. That's another, a much more profound way to get the view. So there are many different ways of discovering this lack of an owner. But when we sangye, when we clear away all our obscurations and negative qualities, naturally all the Buddha nature flourishes. Because there's no owner getting in the way. That owner, that self, is what gets in the way. It's what causes all the problems. So then the fourth test that the Buddha gave, he said, Nyanginle Debe Shiwao, which means, well, you can say, translated as nirvana is peace, except the Tibetans didn't translate nirvana literally, because nirvana is more of a, literally it means extinction. It's more of a Hinayana idea. There's no individual self, you realize that, and you cut the stream of birth and death. You're not reborn in samsara. But that's not becoming a Buddha. From the Mahayana point of view, to totally wake up, for the Buddha nature to flourish, one has to recognize the non-ownership of all phenomena. So, Nyanginle Deva means going beyond misery is peace. And then depending on which different view and method of practice, what going beyond misery is explained a little differently. But basically it means, what's the source of the misery? What's the source of all of the neurosis in our minds? Buddhism defines neurosis as mental events, afflictive mental events, based on a deluded consciousness, which is most of what happens in our minds. Aversion, attachment. Even when we think we're happy, that happiness usually has strong seeds of attachment and aversion built into it, which lead to suffering. And it's quite temporary, right? So what's the cause of all that? It's that I, that illusory owner that fools us into thinking it's there. If we can go beyond all of that, there's peace. And that's the only really peace that there is. Everything else is a temporary solution, a very temporary, inadequate solution. So, if we think about bodhicitta mind, not compounded, not leaked means we don't leak out of it, and there's no self. And then it's beyond any dualistic conceptualization based on self and other. That starts to get way beyond our concept of a kind heart, having compassion. Compassion is good Because compassion is one of the few dualistic emotional events in our mind that just a little bit melts our self-cherishing, right? We don't think about ourselves, we think about others. And that self-cherishing, that is the I. That's the source of the I. It reinforces the I. But when we have empathy, when we have compassion for others, that eases up, loosens up a little bit. And so we can taste, we can be less leaked out. We can taste our Buddha nature a little better. But when we're really talking about bodhicitta, the heart-mind of waking up, then it's not just like I have compassion for them. Manjushri, in one of the sutras, he talks about it. A bodhisattva should see the beings for whose benefit he is working. It's like the reflection of a moon in water. There's no real moon there. So there's an illusory bodhisattva and illusory beings with the illusion of suffering. And somehow the compassion that arises from that understanding is much greater than we can conceive of than just, I have empathy for that person. It's described as like the sun and the light from the sun. Non-referential compassion for all sentient beings. If one really recognizes one's nature, one is powerless not to have that compassion. So that's really the point of meditation. Otherwise, I mean, mindfulness is good in the sense that most of us spend our lives just kind of like wild elephants or like dry leaves in the wind, totally helpless when our minds get out of control. And a flash of anger, frustration, obsessive desire, it can lead to so much silly, useless, needless misery for ourselves and the people in our lives. So, just a little bit of mindfulness and self-control to keep a lid on that, that's a good thing. We'll be happier, we'll suffer less. But you know, a sharpshooter practices mindfulness. I mean, snipers have really good shamatha meditation. And that's not going in the same direction that we're thinking about. So our aspiration, our intention, we're joining mindfulness with this bodhicitta mind. We want to wake up. These days, everybody knows stockbrokers and whether you're in Wall Street or whether you're in LA, everybody's got a mindfulness app on their smartphone now. Mindfulness is so popular. And lots of people in the context of their work or whatever they do, they may develop a certain amount of concentration, the ability to focus one point and think, okay, that's good, but why? What are you going to do with it? And so, at the very least, our practice of meditation, it should be an antidote for our neurosis, for our afflictive emotions, for our aggression, for our desire. I remember many years ago when I'd only been with Chögyam Rinpoche maybe, when did we go to Bodh Gaya? A little more than a year. And a bunch of us went on pilgrimage to India with Rinpoche. And we were at Sarnath, and he asked us all, how did your meditation practice change you? How did your meditation practice change you? And everybody had a different answer. But my answer then as a new student was, it made my mind less reactive. That was the beginning. I reacted a little bit less. So that was a great benefit. Just the beginning. But the more we cultivate bodhicitta and connect it with this calm and this focus and this ability to keep our minds from getting out of control, then there's something magical that happens, because right now we can't really practice from the Buddha nature side, right? We're all in the leaked side. So it's all going to be fabricated. So somehow we have to get the inspiration to access that, because that's so much more powerful than anything we can fabricate from our mind. So when we meditate on compassion, when we have empathy, it helps a great deal. And that's why that's so emphasized in the teachings. Basically, compassion and devotion. Devotion to the Buddha's teachings and to the teacher. Those are both, when we cultivate those, that I loosens up a little bit. We get free from it for just a moment, and our Buddha nature can open up. We can unleak a little bit and taste those qualities. And that has a tremendous effect on us. The Buddha had said in the sutras somewhere, he said, if you can just remain in a genuine recognition of your nature from the time it takes an ant to crawl from one side of your nose to the other. I forget the verbatim quote, but it's something like, you'll purify more negative karma than making offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 3 times in the 10 directions, equal to the grains of sand in the Ganges River Valley. The taste of your own nature is very powerful, and so we need to inspire ourselves. Yeah. So I've gone on for a while, and most of you have actually done a fair amount of practice. So before we start in and meditate, does anybody have any questions? Questions about your practice, questions about meditation, questions about anything I said? There's a mic, so.
Hello? Hello? What is it? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Lama John, is it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, my name is Mario. This is actually my first time here. And I've been, I guess, interested. I grew up in Latin America. Buddhism is essentially non-existent in Latin America, but I mean, I guess I would catch glimpses on books. And I remember my sister was in college taking a religious course, and she had a text on Buddhism, and you know, I guess what attracted me to Buddhism was just that serenity that you would see on the images of monks and Buddhist practitioners, and that, at least my superficial understanding of it was that there was a way out of suffering, that the whole point of Buddhism was to cultivate peace. And I didn't really grow up in an environment quite conducive to that. So anxiety was kind of the norm in my family, kind of ran.
Yeah.
So I've been practicing on and off for about 2 years. When you mentioned the meditation apps, and I mean that's kind of how I've gotten started. But I feel pretty serious, and I think the more I think about it, the more I feel like I'm willing and ready to commit to this path, whatever this path is, or wherever it may take me. And so it's basically that. I mean, the question is, I mean, do you have any general suggestions for somebody such as myself starting on the path? And I mean, I admire, I take a lot of inspiration from your story. I mean, they were explaining to me that that you were off in Nepal and that you did 3-year long solo retreats. I don't know how you didn't go crazy, but kudos to you. Kudos to you. And I admire that. I really, because I can't. I mean, I sometimes I romanticize about going off to Asia and studying with great masters and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm quite ready to take that leap, but yeah, I mean, just do you have any general suggestion about what I can do?
First, I have a question for you, because I could sound like I'm making fun of the mindfulness apps, and maybe I shouldn't.
I didn't take offense from it.
No, but really, I mean, it seems like that's something that's really helped you.
It started in me. It started me off.
And I'm guessing there's probably a lot of people out there where that's a safe way and an accessible way to start to meditate. So were you able to use these apps and start to do a daily practice?
Yeah, I mean, I do have I would consider a daily practice, and it's kind of my priority. Like I mean, the day is crazy, and I have a corporate job. I'm at the bottom rung of the corporate ladder. And so, but I just, somehow I do whatever I can to squeeze in the morning. Morning is really hectic. I mean, I get up before 6 in the morning, and I mean, I do a little bit of running, and I do about 10 minutes of meditation, because that's all I really have before I have to run out the door to catch the bus. But but then in the afternoon, I'm trying to do at least 20 minutes.
Great.
So, and I do actually. The app I'm using right now is it was created with Matthew Ricard.
Really?
Yeah, he's created a meditation.
So there's more than just mindfulness meditation involved if Matthew's involved.
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I notice, is that he delves a little bit. I'm just starting with it, but it seems interesting. I take a lot of inspiration from him as well. And
yeah, so. Matthew's an extraordinary man. And so where to start? We say tu samgom. First study, then reflect, then meditate. First you should study and understand, and then reflect on your understanding. First we clear away our doubts and misconceptions by studying. Then we clear away our doubts and misconceptions by reflecting on that, asking questions from teachers, and then reflecting and clarifying ourselves and asking questions. And then finally we meditate, we put it into practice. So you're doing the right thing. I think what I did at the beginning, I had early in my life no contact with live Buddhists. There was a Buddhist statue in my parents' living room, and I was kind of from a not very religious Jewish background and very intellectual family, and got into philosophy. And then from that, started to think about Buddhism. And after college, then met real Buddhists. So Studying is good, and studying widely and reading books and understanding is really good. And then finding a teacher is really important. In our tradition, it's so interesting. In our tradition in Asia, just sitting meditation is a very advanced practice. It's taught at the end, not at the beginning. Because at that point, they're not just teaching mindfulness and attentiveness. They're really trying to teach the vipassana, the insight. And so there's all kinds of devotional practices and prayers and practices involving mantra and recitation and rituals that are done for years first. But over in the West, just sitting is an entryway for people. All this other stuff, there's so much cultural dissonance, it's so difficult to access. And so I really encourage you to study widely. And the word anybody who's heard me teach over and over again at the center has heard me teach, has heard again and again, is inspiration. Inspiration. So, inspiration is how you wake up. And inspiration is the essence of the Vajrayana path taught in our tradition, but it's the essence of any successful spiritual practice. I mean, you have some inspiration from your life experience that motivated you to go after this on your own up to now because you've seen the truth of the Buddha's teaching, you've seen the suffering. And there's no way out outside. All the outside paths are temporary. Some people, it sounds like you had very difficult circumstances at the beginning of your life. Some people come to Buddhism that way. Some people come to Buddhism because they've got what outwardly should be very happy, positive, supportive circumstances, and they're not happy. And they look inside and they say, I'm not happy. I'm successful in X, Y, and Z ways, and I'm living this wealthy, peaceful place, and I'm not happy. Why? It's inside, it's the mind. It's the source, all the source of happiness and suffering is your mind. So you can come at that from various directions. For all of you, studying is good. We need to understand, and particularly as Westerners, because we don't grow up in the tradition, and it's so different from the way we've been raised and socialized, and it's so opposite. Really, the Buddha, it's not just opposite to Western culture. Buddhism is opposite to every culture. The Buddha's basic insight, the Buddha's life story was he had it all. So there's this story about a prince in ancient India. But it could be the son of a hedge fund manager on Long Island, or it could be whatever success story in any culture in the world where somebody's looking at wealth, power, and being taken care of and having a beautiful life handed to them and seeing this is not the answer and just walking away from it. This won't make me happy. It doesn't make anybody happy in the end. In the end, there's birth, old age, sickness, and death. And everywhere we look outside, we can't find an answer to that. We have to look inside for the answer. So, studying is important, and reflecting, and finding teachers, and asking questions. The main thing is inspiration. You want to find a teacher that inspires you. And for me, first I connected with Chögyam Rinpoche in California all those years ago, and then Suksin Rinpoche came over, his teacher, and I made this really strong connection and spent time with him in Asia for years. And it was the inspiration. I've met many great teachers, but the teachers that I've stuck with and that have really changed me, it's just you think of your teacher. And so The Dharma should inspire you. The teacher should inspire you. You should find ways to inspire yourself in life, because otherwise there's no way. Look at the life you're living, right? How are you going to practice without the inspiration? It's not easy. And I think it's not easy for all of us in this world. A number of my teachers grew up in Tibet and lived for years in Tibet without anything. It was easy to be a beggar yogi in Tibet. Lama Chimi Rinpoche used to say, you know, I was never hungry. He said, if I wanted new clothes, it was a little difficult. If I needed to get some, you know, a decent new pair of clothes, but it wasn't that hard. He said, but if I needed in Tibet, the buttons are usually made out of silver or copper, so they were kind of bad. But like if I lost a button, finding a new button, that was tough. But I could find a shirt or a jacket, and you always had enough food to eat wherever you went, and people would give you a place to stay, and everybody respected you. And so you didn't have to worry. I mean, if you, even at that level, without any position in a monastic institution, any title, you could be a very serious Dharma practitioner. He lived for 12 years and was one of Dudjom Rinpoche's closest students. He showed up as this beggar without anything. He left home at age 26, walked across Tibet for 2 years, stayed with Dudjom Rinpoche for 12 years. And we can't do that. There's no social infrastructure for practicing Buddhism. To take a month off and do a retreat is just so rare in this day and age. And so we're pushing against the current. And it takes a tremendous amount of discipline. And that kind of discipline is really only going to come from inspiration. So you're going to have understanding to really have that kind of discipline, to get up in the morning when it's tough. And to really, and inspiration comes in many places. We see how it benefits our own mind. One of my early experiences is I had some kind of very challenging experiences with work and friends, and I was just angry. And I had felt judged and misunderstood, like all of us do at certain points in our life. And I was young and not used to that. And was kind of holding on to it. And I was discovering Buddhism, and I had studied philosophy as an undergraduate. And I picked up a book on Madhyamaka, first by the Dalai Lama, and then there was a book by Lama Zopa. And as I started reading and studying this, okay, I meditate, think about there's no, so you use that analysis of the drum on yourself. Like, well, where is John? Is the John now the same as the John 5 minutes ago or yesterday? Or is my projection of who John is, that changes? Where is it? Can I find it? So why am I getting angry about somebody else's projection, which is changing, right? And my anger and resentment, I started feeling better. It went away. The stuff really worked. And so you ought to feel some benefit in your own mind, whether you're practicing meditation, whether you're studying, that's inspiring. And then our teachers are inspiring, they're an example. And the teachings, the life stories, I think, of these great saints of the past, for me, they were tremendously inspiring. But it can also be really kind of frustrating in our culture, because we have a different situation here. I mean, we just can't live like that. So we have to have just tremendous determination. The Buddhist definition of diligence is enthusiastic joy at positive actions. So the diligence comes from joy, and joy comes from inspiration. So that's the best advice I can give you. And I hope you get a chance to meet Chögyam Rinpoche when he comes back here, and I get some teachings from him. And yeah.
Yeah, I was nodding my head a lot to what you were saying, so a lot of it resounded with me. I mean, you said you teach in Vermont, correct?
Little bit, yeah.
So, and I mean, you might repeat yourself here, but yeah, like, what do you recommend to Westerners in general, Westerners who want to adopt this, maybe, I don't know, lifestyle, or they want to
Study, get good guidance on how to practice as much as you can, find practice that inspires you, find ways to keep yourself inspired, find teachers that inspire you, find ways to keep yourself inspired. And at a certain point, you're going to really find your path and your teacher, and then you stick. At the beginning, you need to look, you need to understand. You don't just stop in one place. Study widely, read, understand, and test a teacher. If there's a teacher you think you really trust, be careful. They may be a good teacher, but they may not be for you. So spend some time. You can really work with this person, they can really work with you. At a certain point, you've had enough teachings, and you've got a teacher who's really got what it takes to help you, then you stick with that teacher. Because when the practice starts to get serious, then there's a Patra Rinpoche, he says in Words of My Perfect Teacher, there's an old aphorism, the best friend is the one who points out your hidden faults, right? So if a teacher really starts to trust you, they might start to give you a hard time to help you. And if that's when immediately you decide to go somewhere else, you're not going to get anywhere. So you really have to develop that trust. It's any relationship in life that's worthwhile, trust develops over time, right? And I think that's something for everyone to keep in mind. But then once that trust is there has to be commitment. And this is something that's really hard in our culture. Commitment to the practice, commitment to the teacher, commitment to the lineage. I mean, if the inspiration is there, the understanding is there, and the trust is developed, then you have to have that commitment, because otherwise you don't get anything from it. And so like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Shall we sit? So everybody's got some idea how to sit, because everybody's heard this before. You don't have to sit in lotus posture like this, particularly if you're not used to sitting cross-legged on the ground. Then these gomdens are really great. And the way you sit on them is not right on the edge, but a little bit back, like riding a horse sitting in the saddle. And if you sit on it properly, your knees are going to drop below your hips. And when your knees drop below your hips, something magical happens to your pelvis. You might need to be a little bit more forward than that. Let's see, do your knees drop when you do that? Or try to move your feet a little more like this. Yeah, your knees are starting to drop a little bit. When your knees drop below your hips, your back, lower back pushes forward. And when that happens, your whole spine straightens out and your mind gets more fresh and awake. So the posture is really important, and it takes time. But if you're not in a comfortable posture, then it creates tension, and it's just very hard to practice. So sit straight in a comfortable posture, and then you can keep your hands folded like this. You can keep your hands on your knees. In our tradition, in some traditions, you put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. In our tradition, we breathe through our mouth. Mouth is just slightly open, just enough so a fly could fly in and out. Tongue is relaxed in normal position. You don't have to put it up on the roof of your mouth or do anything special with your tongue. And you just let your breathing be natural. And then let your gaze be gentle. Your whole body posture, you get really straight and then you let it feel gentle. And then you let your gaze be gentle, and your gaze should be a little bit down over the bridge of your nose. Doesn't have to be too far down, just a little bit downwards. And you don't particularly need to gaze at anything. You just let your gaze rest in this space, dissolve in this space. So there's so many different, if some of you have your own practice the way you're already practicing, that's fine, you can just do that. Otherwise, we'll just watch the breath. And when I say watch the breath, I mean just be aware of the breath in a panoramic way. Sometimes there's very specific teachings. Feel the breath as it goes out your lips, or feel the breath in your belly, or hear the sound of the breath. There's no need to be, here with this technique, there's no need to be so detailed. Just have a sort of general panoramic awareness of the breath. Notice when the breath is coming in, and notice when the breath is going out. And notice when the breath is coming in, and notice when the breath is going out. That's all you have to do. And if from time to time you notice you're distracted, you just come back to the breath. Now, if you get distracted or uptight, you're struggling a little bit, you can also sometimes, when you notice the breath going out, just follow the breath out and dissolve into space. Notice the breath coming in, follow the breath out and dissolve into space. And then you notice the breath coming in, you notice the breath going out. So that's it. So we'll start, it's always good to start a session of meditation by clearing the stale breath. It's kind of like hitting the reset button on a piece of electronic equipment. And there's many techniques for doing this, but I'm going to teach you a very simple one. It's just based on a long exhale out of the mouth. We go, and when we do that, we pull our diaphragm all the way up and completely empty out. And when you do that, you're going to feel a natural pause there at the end, and you just let that happen. And then when the breath naturally comes in, you breathe in, fill up, and we'll do that 3 times together, and then we'll start the session. Everyone good with that? Everyone knows what they're doing? Okay. So everybody, just loosen up. If you need to stand up and stretch your legs, you can. We're just going to take a minute or two to stretch and freshen up without distracting ourselves very much. And then we're going to sit again. Remember to breathe. And when you're ready, everybody can sit down again. So now let's straighten our posture up again, make it really straight. And then, without losing that straight, tall posture, let your whole body relax, let your shoulders drop. It's like everything's just hanging off your spine. And now let that feel very gentle. You should feel gentle. You shouldn't be pushing, straining. You should be very relaxed, gentle feeling with your body posture. And then your breath is natural and really gentle. And then we'll take 3 deep, long, big breaths in and out, like before, and we'll sit again. Just let everything completely easy, gentle, let it be. So thank you. Let's all aspire to wake up a little bit every day, as much as we can, however we can. Inspire the bodhicitta, that heart mind of awakening within ourselves. Maybe through lots of formal disciplined Buddhist practice, or if not, at least with whatever can inspire our basic goodness, or both, even better. I've got one here, I think. Thanks. In the world in general, and in this nation, may not even the names disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtuous qualities, merit, and prosperity greatly increase. And may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly arise. In the world in general, and in this nation, may not even the names disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtuous qualities, merit, and prosperity greatly increase. And may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly arise. In the world in general, and in this nation, may not even the names disease, famine, war, and suffering be heard. May virtuous qualities, merit, and prosperity greatly increase. And may continuous good fortune and sublime well-being perfectly arise. By this merit, may all beings gain omniscience, and thus defeat the neurosis and negative actions which are the enemies. From the turbulent waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of cyclic existence, may all beings be liberated. So thank you. Have a good evening.